Good morning. I'm Brian Curtis.
And I'm Doug Krisner. Here are the stories we're following today.
Iran is warning the U.S. it will not be spared if the Israel-Hamas war spreads. Ed Baxter has global news from the 960 newsroom in San Francisco. Ed?
Yeah, that's right, Brian. And the warning goes both ways. Iran's foreign minister, Hossein Amir-Abdollahian, saying the the U.S. is overseeing genocide against the Palestinian people and says, quote, I warn, if the genocide in Gaza continues, they will not be spared these fires. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken also addressing the UN.
If Iran or its proxies attack U.S. personnel anywhere, make no mistake, we will defend our people, we will defend our security swiftly and decisively.
And calls on the other member nations to send Iran a loud and clear message that it should not expand the war. Meanwhile, National Security Council spokesman John Kirby says aid into Palestine is moving slowly.
Since the 21st of this month, some 74 trucks have now gotten in, 12 over just the last 24 hours. Not enough.
And he says that it really needs to go faster. Meanwhile, Ukraine, he says the military has been able to hold on to the defense against the Russian campaign and the reports of unrest in Russian forces.
We have information that the Russian military has been actually executing soldiers who refuse to follow orders.
Kirby says more aid for Ukraine is needed as well. The manhunt in Maine for the suspect in the mass shooting that has left 18 people dead and 13 injured is massive. The manhunt is. Maine's Governor Janet Mills says concern for safety is still very high today.
Maine State Police have issued a shelter-in-place order for Lewiston, Lisbon, and Bowdoin as the manhunt for that person of interest, Robert Card of Bowdoin, continues.
And some schools and colleges also remain under lockdown. The White House is calling on the new Speaker, Mike Johnson, to start work immediately on gun legislation. This is a spokeswoman, Karine Jean-Pierre.
Let's work together to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Let's work together to enact universal background checks, require safe storage of guns, and keep guns out of the hands of criminals and dangerous individuals who have no business being armed with a weapon of war.
And Johnson responds, prayer is the answer.
This is a dark time in America. We have a lot of problems, and we're really, really hopeful and prayerful. Prayer is appropriate in a time like this.
And Vice President Kamala Harris says another American community torn apart by gun violence.
In our country today, the leading cause of death of American children is gun violence.
Yeah, so they're all calling for legislation. President Joe Biden set to meet with China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi tomorrow. Wang and the U.S. to try to rough over some rough edges with the potential of a higher level meeting at APEC. But Bloomberg's Nick Wadham says the goal for the U.S. is just making things personal.
So what you're really seeing is an administration that wants to get things back on track and do what Joe Biden likes best, which is those interpersonal relationships with other leaders around the world.
And we'll have more details on the meeting in just a couple of minutes. Taiwan says China's carrier strike group is crossing the Abashi Channel and that it is a very dangerous situation. China's defense ministry is pushing back, saying Taiwan is moving in a dangerous direction, using the words dangerous situation of war at an accelerated pace. This after reports that Taipei plans to buy military drones. Global news 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now in San Francisco. I'm Ed Baxter, and this is Bloomberg.
I'm Brian Curtis, along with Doug Krisner. Paul Allen will join us shortly. We take a look here at some of the top business stories of the hour and the effect on markets. Amazon reporting third quarter revenue and profit that topped analysts' expectations. That's thanks to rising sales in the company's retail, advertising, and cloud computing units. Reaction from Bloomberg's Poonam Goyal.
They posted really robust online gains here, double digits for the third party, which is obviously impressive at 20%. And then on their own online sales, the 1P business, you mentioned up 7%. And I think that's very healthy considering the environment that we're in. So I think they're on track to deliver a good holiday. Keep in mind that last year the compares are much easier because they did report a 2% decline in online sales. So easy compares plus a good start to holiday with the results that they're reporting bodes well for them as they move into the fourth quarter.
That's Poonam Goyal. The results today provided more evidence of Amazon's cost-cutting efforts. Amazon's spending on sales and marketing declined, and that's the first since at least 2015. Amazon shares really buffeted in late trading, first up, then down a little, and at the moment trading higher by 3.4%.
We also heard from Intel after the bell, and there are really no shortage of positive remarks. The stock, as a result, is up 8.6% in the late U.S. session. Intel is now predicting a return to sales growth in the fourth quarter. We have more from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
The quarter was fueled by an improving PC market and a more competitive product line. Intel said sales in the period will be $14.6 billion to $15.6 billion. That compares with an average analyst estimate of $14.4 billion. The upbeat outlook shows growing momentum for Intel's turnaround efforts under CEO Pat Gelsinger. The company has said that the PC market, its biggest business unit by shipments, is through the worst of a historic slump caused by a buildup in inventory. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
Well, Ford Motors said that, or it reported earnings that fell short of third quarter expectations. And it comes just after the automaker agreed to a 25% wage hike in a tentative deal to end the UAW strike. We get more now from Bloomberg's Tom Busby.
It was a difficult quarter for Ford despite strong auto sales, especially for its gas-powered models. But adjusted earnings per share were 39 cents, well below the 47 cents analysts expected. But because of higher sticker prices, Ford's revenue, $43.8 billion, was better than forecast. Ford CEO Jim Farley said in a statement that the company is now, quote, radically changing how we work in order to deal with some unspecified cost and quality issues. The automaker also said the 6-week-long strike has costed $1.3 billion so far. Tom Busby, Bloomberg Radio.
Ford shares traded down a little more than 4% in after hours. And separately, we're hearing that the UAW has offered a new contract proposal to General Motors similar to the tentative agreement with Ford. The automaker is said to be preparing a counteroffer for Thursday or Friday. Doug?
Well, in the last few months, we have seen a surge in Treasury bond yields at the long end. And today, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said this move is not being driven by a widening fiscal deficit. Here she is speaking earlier with Bloomberg.
We're seeing yields go up in most advanced countries. Part of the increase in yields, I think, is simply a reflection of the strength of the economy, the notion that interest rates will be higher for longer.
Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen there. She spoke hours after the GDP report for the third quarter showed the American economy grew at an annual rate of 4.9%. That is the fastest pace in nearly 2 years. The key driver, robust consumer spending. Brian?
Well, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is said to be meeting President Joe Biden on Friday. Bloomberg's Bonnie Au has the story from Hong Kong.
Wang's visit in Washington may lay the groundwork for a potential meeting between the U.S. and Chinese leaders. Biden has for months said he hoped to meet President Xi in the fall. The anticipation comes as geopolitical ties between the two nations are showing optimism. But Chinese officials have so far declined to confirm Xi's attendance at the APEC summit. Wang will also be meeting Secretary of State Antony Blinken and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. We hear the U.S. side is planning to raise the subject of the Israel-Hamas war. In Hong Kong, I'm Bonnie Au, Bloomberg Radio.
11 minutes past the hour. I'm Brian Curtis with Paul Allen, and we say good morning to Gene Munster, managing partner at Deepwater Asset Management. Gene, thanks very much for being with us. So we have a couple of wars to consider, a very intriguing macro environment and earnings. Let's start with earnings. On my scorecard, at least on the initial response to the earnings from the Super 7 that have got so much attention this year, I got 3 positive, 3 negative. But the market overall has been negative. Your thoughts on how to frame this?
Well, it's definitely been negative, and I think that we need to think what's going to happen over the next 3, 6, and 12 months. And over the next 3 months, when it comes to tech, we're probably going to see interest rates stay pretty much where they're at. Now, they may go up a little bit, but they're unlikely to go down. And I think that that is first and foremost, as at Deepwater, we think about our investments in tech. That dynamic is going to be a headwind to, I think, how some of this tech is going to perform. the macro does matter. Just go back and look at what's happened with the NASDAQ, the Russell 500, since talks of rates going higher have impacted, of course, these stocks. And as far as the geopolitical piece to it, that had a particular potent impact on what happened with Meta yesterday, and specifically shares were up in the after hours after they reported their quarter. And then after the CFO, Susan Lee, mentioned softness in the first few weeks with the conflict in the Middle East, that sent shares down 6%. And so ultimately, as these do matter relative to interest rates and what some of the macro commentary is. And so it is something we're keeping a close eye on. We do focus, good news here, we do focus on where the world is going. And ultimately, I think the companies that are benefiting from that will ultimately pull through this.
Yeah, to your point on those price movements, I mean, we've had Meta off about 7.5% over the past 2 days, Alphabet off about 12% in the same period. If you think about, this notion that, okay, rates might be higher for longer, the market seems to have wrapped its head around that. But one of those other big themes, AI, it's not going away. When you see those sorts of dips, do you buy?
I think you do. And part of the reason is we do, I would say that. At Deepwater, I think the question that I would ask is, how much do you believe in how transformative AI will be? From our perspective, we don't think we've even started. There's people that say we're in an AI bubble. We don't think we're anything even close to it. I can go through the numbers that support that. But I think more importantly is we've seen one massive shift, which is relative to NVIDIA's business. Intel tonight reported, and their shares were up 7%. So the hardware piece is having a benefit here, but the broader benefit about how this can create new business lines, improve engagement, create higher profit margins for companies, that's something that's going to take 3, 5, 10 years. And so, yes, I think that if you have patience, you own some of these companies. And I think the biggest ones, the one we're most optimistic about, the two, is relative to Google and Meta, that should benefit for the next 5 years around this theme. So absolutely, I would say it a slightly different way is it's hard to understate the significance that AI is going to have on these companies in the next 5 years.
Gene, optimization was a big theme this year for many, most notably at Meta, but others as well. Is that still the case for these companies, or are we starting to see now any kind of uptick in spending, in CapEx and in investment?
They're still using the language, and Meta used the language about optimization. Microsoft, Google, they talk about this, but that we're hitting the second derivative here. In other words, is that we've had most of the improvement has happened around profitability. Amazon tonight had some impressive upside to margins, but the bigger picture is that we're through the year of optimization, the year of improving efficiencies. And I think that the focus is going to turn much more back to growth. And I'll just give a quick example of a support to that is that Amazon reported they absolutely crushed the earnings estimates. And the stock initially was up, and then it went down because the AWS segment, which is a smaller part of their business, but it's kind of the signature of a growth opportunity, that missed numbers. And then on their earnings call just recently, the CEO said that they've had a ton of bookings in the month of September, hinting that the growth will reaccelerate in the December quarter. And sure enough, shares went up basically immediately 4% on that. And I think that speaks to we have turned the page from the year of efficiency a few quarters ago. Now we're back to the year of growth powered by AI.
Yeah. We've also heard from SK Hynix Intel this week. Do you feel like the bottom's in terms of cyclical memory chip demand?
I think that's a little bit more of a mystery because I think that there is the macro. I do think we are going to go to a recession. I think the market is properly factoring that into a lot of retail stocks. Even though their businesses are doing well, the stocks are down. That means that the market is anticipating some sort of a slowdown. I think just consumer still hangs in there, but if eventually in the next 6-12 months, I think it will pull back. Doesn't impact the big AI opportunity, but I think from a lot of these chips and memory, I think you could see a slowdown. So simply put, I don't think the bottom's in.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Asia, your morning brief on the stories making news from Hong Kong to Singapore and Wall Street.
Look for us on your podcast feed every day on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcast.
You can also listen live each day on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, Sirius XM Channel 119, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Brian Curtis.
And I'm Doug Krisner. Join us again tomorrow for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.